When I was growing up, there was an assumption that basic fact knowledge couldn't really be taught. It simply had to be practiced, memorized, and assessed. And so the instruction looked very much like practice tests, time tests, and flashcard drills. The message we're getting from the Common Core, however, is that children, even quite young children, are capable of thinking strategically, and that strategic thinking needs to be intentionally activated in the process of learning and developing fact fluency. And so in this PD module, we've really focused on what could that look like if we were to actually instruct for fact fluency in a way that activated strategic thinking. What could that look like and what could we do? And now we get to this point where we're talking about how we can assess fact fluency and the different ways that that can look if we're not going to simply use the approaches of the past, which are the timed test approach. So we've been discussing earlier in the PD module a particular study cited in the Common Core references section that was conducted by Henry and Brown on basic facts in California. And the implications of that study raise serious questions about the efficacy of using flashcards, practice worksheets, and time tests. So in this lesson, we're going to explore a possible approach that actually emphasizes strategic development over the rote practice. It's important to remember that both approaches do have the same end goal, which is fast and accurate fact retrieval. But the strategy development approach has not only been found to be more successful, it has the added benefit of supporting number sense and addressing several of the mathematical standards of practice, which we'll take a look at in just a minute. We're supporting students in getting to the point where they can look at a fact and say, that particular number combination lends itself to this particular strategy. The actual strategies will incorporate their quantitative reasoning based on number relationships. So in practice, there will be several obvious differences in our approach to fact fluency. If you've been accustomed to daily fact tests, you will notice that much of the time that you would have spent testing has now been replaced with instructional opportunities and/or reinforcement tasks. So the assessments are fewer, but they're more targeted. Traditionally, we see practicing all of the facts over and over, or practicing them in sets, such as the +5 facts and the +7 facts. Now the practice chunks are actually according to strategy rather than to the value of a particular addend. So instead of having the +5 facts, we're going to practice facts where we get to use a doubles +1 strategy, for example. So we look at all of the facts perhaps that work well with a make 10 strategy. That would be another example. The reinforcement activities will be designed to foster effective arithmetic strategies. And as you can see at the bottom, this does allow for us to actually address mathematical standards of practice. So let's take a look at that. Here you see the different phases of the instructional sequence that we've been discussing. And then in the process, you see the kinds, and this is not conclusive, but these are the kinds of mathematical standards of practice that could easily lend themselves to that stage. During the strategy exploration, you are modeling how to use visual representations to elicit an idea or an aha about the way numbers work, and the students are then also using concrete materials to explore this idea. In the process, they're looking for patterns that they can basically employ to try to make hard problems easier. They're learning how to reason abstractly and quantitatively using hard facts and figuring out how the hard facts are quantitatively related to a easier fact that they already know and what kinds of adjustments and compensations they need to make. They can be listening to other people's strategies and determining if they work or don't work. They're going to look at the particular numbers and have to make a decision about which of the strategies in my repertoire would really lend itself to that particular number set. And then eventually all of this, the ultimate goal of this fact fluency is actually for children to be able to use them in problem solving so that their cognitive load is low with the numbers and they can focus on the complexity of the problem. So there's quite a different number of mathematical standards of practice that you can embed in your instruction through the kind of work we've been talking about. So here's a process for assessment. It's actually the same process we've been talking about, but I've in orange indicated what kind of assessment features. Initially, the children spend an intense period of time, possibly 2 to 3 lessons, exploring a new strategy. During that time, the only kind of assessment that actively happens would be a more informal kind of assessment, lots of observation perhaps, as the teacher watches children, listens to them, and observes them at work to figure out to what extent are they making sense of the new strategy. That's your ultimate goal. Certainly no fluency yet. Then you want the children to be able to apply that strategy in targeted and cued situations without time pressure to see if they're gaining facility in the ease with which they're beginning to use it. And then you want them to be able to do that more quickly and to build up efficiency. So at that point, it makes sense for you to be monitoring their progress with some emphasis beginning on efficiency, but you're still in a targeted and cued situation. That means, for example, that all of the facts that they are working with while they're being assessed in this setting relate to the same kind of strategy. So you might be asking them to be as efficient as possible, but all of the facts they're working with are make 10. So they have their mind already set with what kind of strategy to use. Then eventually you're going to want to try to shift them over to a mixed fact practice where they have to make on-the-fly decisions about what fact strategy to use from one problem to the next. And then eventually their real application, when you really know that they have this fact knowledge, is going to be when you see them being able to apply it quickly and instantly in an authentic practice situation. If you see them knowing a fact quickly when it's in isolated numbers, but the minute it's in a word problem, they start acting it out the problem, then there's a problem with transference. So our assessment sequence is spending a lot of time on formative assessment. Initially, formative assessment with the targeted strategy, where we're just working with the strategy at the time. And that can include some informal teacher assessments, some cued assessments where you tell them up front what strategy you want them to be working on, and some self-assessments with goal setting, so that students have a period of time where they can actually say, these facts I have really well. That's what I'm still struggling with. I need to think through an idea for how I can get that fact figured out. I strongly suggest goal setting, which can also even incorporate some peers for students. You can take a student who's got a good strategy and pair them up with someone who's struggling with a fact and have them talk about what strategy they use and how that works, and have them model it with some visual materials perhaps. Then moving into formative assessment with mixed practice, where we're going to talk in this lesson about how to make that shift between targeted to mixed, and eventually a summative at the end. So the formative is where there's really some time for them to gradually get more accurate and efficient. And then the summative mixed practice, eventually we want the children to have those facts absolutely solid, accurate, efficient. So this is a sample schedule. Now you and your school really need to sit down and sort of think through what your own basic facts approach will be. So I'm not trying to suggest that this is the only way of going about it. But here's an idea, and I've got several of these in this lesson to give you sort of a visual idea of what this could look like in practice. So you could start out the year with a rough plan like this, and it's possible that the students could move a little faster than what I have planned. I'm going to have a certain amount that's flexible based on how they respond. But in the first quarter, my initial goal, my tentative goal, is for the new strategy focus to be on counting on +1, +2, and then eventually +0. And during that time, I'm also going to have some occasional assessments trying to figure out whether they have their kindergarten fluency in place, because they were supposed to come into first grade with all their facts within 5 fluent. And I want to find out if that's actually true or whether some work needs to happen there. And so the mixed fact review that I have, those assessments, which can be formative, but just to get a feel for that, they're going to include primarily the kindergarten facts, and gradually I might fold in some of the count-on facts if the students are ready for that. Second quarter, working with +10, I'm going to do some place value work there, and also focus on sums of 10. And the anchor fact development that I'm doing there, I really want the students to get the sums of 10 and doubles solid by mid-year, so that in the third and fourth quarter, we can work on level 3 methods. And again, the mixed review practice is everything from before. So it's going to mainly be the kindergarten facts, now also the +1, +2, and +0 facts. And as the students get it solid, I can begin to fold in some +10, sums of 10, and doubles. So in third quarter, then, I'm now going to try to use the 2 strategies they've used at the beginning of the year, +1, and sums of 10 and doubles, those 2 anchor facts, and merge those for a +1, +1 -1 approach. So sums of 10 +1, doubles +1, and then if that works pretty well, we'll go into -1. And you'll see that the mixed fact review is always a little bit behind the new strategy. I'm not going to immediately hold that new strategy accountable to assessment. The assessment part is always facts from before. And then fourth quarter is the make 10. So you get a feel for how that could actually play out. And here you see the assessment strategy again. So I've got the new strategy. The only kind of assessments the new strategy will get are targeted. That means only that assessment. Only that strategy is being assessed at a time instead of throwing it into the big mixed review, because I want to actively build the cognitive pathways that can access that strategy. And so I'm targeting it at that point in time. And then once it becomes solidified, then we move it into the mixed fact assessment. And here you see in the last column some mixed fact assessment goals. So early in the year, I want them to be able to add and subtract within 5. And by October, I would like their facts within 5 and their count on facts +1 to be able to be assessed and see that. And then by the end of the quarter, I'm hoping that all the associated subtraction facts for those particular problems can also be developed. So you see how this actually develops over time. And the middle column actually shows you what kind of number talk focus would be happening during that quarter. And then just to pull that out in a more fine-grained way, over to the right, you see an example. It says here, week of September 28th, for what that little block of time, remember distributed practice is what we're going for. So not counting the 2 to 3 lesson intensive focus, we can also have every day some focus on number development. Mental math is what a lot of people call it, but the number talks occur in this week 3 times that week, 1 cued assessment that's targeted and 1 mixed review. So some new strategy assessments when you're just focusing not on the old review but the new things can include some things we've talked about already. The paired exercises and cued exercises were in a previous lesson. Flashcard sorts we talked about in a previous lesson. And the anecdotal records of game playing. Games count to kids. They want to do well, and so oftentimes you can see them using facts here, especially if you choose games intentionally for the capacity to generate random facts. So you can take some anecdotal records during game playing of children to see what kind of facts they're generating quickly and where it is that they have to, you see them falling into like a count it out or using their fingers, that kind of a thing. And the game playing could happen, depends on your schedule, but if you have center time, if they have indoor recess, if they come early and they're in the classroom before the school day starts, it could be an activity then. Okay, I like to do, just getting back to a flashcard sort. We've talked a little bit about this before, but I want to come back to it again. I like to do a variety of formative assessments, and one goal that I have for the experience is I really want the children to become better at self-monitoring their learning, thinking about what they do well, where they need to improve, and one way to do that is through a flashcard sort. So in this approach, a child takes a deck of flashcards, which has just the facts that lend themselves to a particular target strategy. And they go through the deck and they sort it into fast facts, slow facts, and facts I don't know. And in fact, the children can have 2 different decks. One can be their old mixed review facts and one can be their new deck. And in a previous lesson, I gave a suggestion of how the decks could be organized for first grade. So after they do this sort into fast facts, slow facts, and facts I don't know, then they can set a goal for which facts they really want to work on next, because otherwise it seems too overwhelming. If you have a lot that you're getting wrong, it just seems hopeless. But if you say, let me choose a particular fact or 2 that I'm really going to work on, and what can I do about that? And set a goal and then try it again later to see how that's coming. And the exact time frame can be organized with the teacher. Now, as an instructor, you want to plan what you're going to do with the results to these formative assessments. So if the individual or small group are having some particular difficulties, then you can work with them more as an individual or small group, setting some goals, like perhaps after a flashcard sort. You can also decide who would benefit by particular kinds of games or tasks or visual representations. You can choose to group them together in a small group during a time when the rest of the group is playing a game or doing another task, and you can work with them directly. You can also work with the parents on just that small goal that's very targeted and see if that will work as well. If a fair number of students in the class are having a particular struggle, then you're going to want to rethink. Remember, I showed you the schedule that I said was tentative based on the students. I may want to say, well, I'm going to spend more time on this strategy. I'm going to do more number talks, or I'm going to look for some reinforcement tasks that are a little different than what we've been doing, but will really push their thinking in this area. And I also want to really think about whether maybe I made a jump to abstract too quickly. Perhaps they need to fall back and use some visual representations, but I want to be careful about that because I don't want to give them a crutch. So I've got a lot of judgment calls I've got to make here as I think about how to construct this pathway towards strategic thinking and fact fluency. All right, now we're going to shift and talk about folding in the new strategy into the old, and that's a vulnerable process. We want to make sure that even when they feel like there's a lot coming at them, that they can still hold on to those strategies and add them to their repertoire of what they're using. So I'm suggesting as a strategy that you begin with just the cued assessments that I've talked about and gradually shift them into random by preparing them with some what I'm calling metacognitive preparation. Metacognitive is just consciously thinking about your own thinking processes. And so we're going to take a look at some examples of some things you could do to transition them into random assessments from these cued. And eventually, when they've had enough experience shifting over, then you can give them a cold assessment. That means they haven't done a metacognitive preparation task. And in the past, a lot of these math fact reviews have been like, how many can you do in a minute? How many did you get accurate in 1 minute? The 1 minute has caused problems. There's a lot of people who have test anxiety and who are clearly not at their best thinking when they're taking a test under pressure. And there are some students who actually do well under that time pressure. Regrettably, they are rarely the student who struggles with math facts. The students who struggle with math facts tend to be the kind of kids who really have a hard time with the 1 minute rule. It's also very frustrating for a number of children not to be able to finish, to have to put their pencil down and not be able to finish. And so a better strategy would be a beat your best time approach. This beat your best time approach equalizes the situation in the classroom. Instead of making it seem as if the kids who have the best memory are also better at math, which is clearly not true, you can actually say, do better than your last time. Everybody has the potential to do that, everyone. They're never going to be a loser in that. They've always got that opportunity that they could beat their own best time. Here's one metacognitive prep strategy called Go Talk Solve. And in this particular strategy, children are told not to solve the problem initially when they take a look at it. Rather, they are to look at the problem and decide what strategy would I use if I were doing this. So instead of putting an answer in the blank, they actually have to say what strategy. And so there's several strategies here. This particular one that you see is a portion of one that would be used after sums of 10 and doubles were just folding in. So count back, count up, and zero difference would be old familiars. And some facts are just going to be so like, duh, of course I know that. That would be recall. Although you'll see in the instructions that children are told, do not use recall unless you really know it instantly. You don't even have to give it a moment's thought. It's just there in your brain. Other than that, you have to name a strategy that you actually would use. So the children go through, and they can take their time to think through their strategy, and then they turn and the talk part is they turn to a partner and see how their strategies are similar or different, and they decide whether both of them would work well or if one has some advantages over the other. And then finally they when the teacher gives them the signal, they turn it over and they solve all of them, seeing which strategy off to the side they had decided that they would use. And another example is a mixed review. This is actually just a math fact page. I went to this website you see here, and I just had it generate facts within 10. And this is what it produced. So you can take a math fact sheet like this, and you probably have a number of these around, and then you can do a metacognitive prep activity with it, where you tell students, don't answer any of the problems. I want you to circle all of the facts on this page that you can use with our new target strategy. And so circle, do that as quickly as you can, just scan, make a decision about which one lends itself to it, which ones, and turn it back over. And then when everybody's ready, you can say, okay, when I give the word, I'm going to have you turn it over and begin to solve as efficiently as you can using only the ones that you've circled. And so you have them turn it over and solve, and eventually you have them solve all of them. In this case, you see one where they circled all the ones they could do, count on +1 or +2. And this one's all the doubles and doubles +1 facts that they could find. So you can have them do that, and initially you can just have them say, okay, we're only solving the ones that you can use this strategy for, don't solve any others, and eventually you can have them solve all of them after they've used the strategy. There's going to be a few facts that still remain a little difficult, at least for some of the students in your class. I call them pesky facts. And so for pesky facts, you probably want to have a bit of a class brainstorm about ways that you could solve them, and these strategies should be visually modeled, and students should have to explain to their peers how does this work, why does it work. So here you see a visual for 5 + 3 is a pesky fact with a domino description of what could be done, a math rack description of how you could solve it, and then a recognition from the number bonds that these two expressions, 5 + 3 and 4 + 4, are equivalent. They both equal 8, and then that's also represented as an equation. If there's more than one kind of strategy proposed by the students, you might see more than one strategy up here, and then the students decide which strategy fits the way I think, which one seems to be a good fit for me. And eventually we're going to integrate the fact knowledge into problem solving. This is where we really know if students have it or not. If they don't make the shift to problem solving, then our work has been in vain. We really need to see that they are applying it. Okay, for end-of-year assessment data, these are the things that we need to get a grip on before they go on to second grade, and this information should be sent on to second grade. The anchor facts need to be absolutely solid. They are the foundation for level 3 strategies, which will continue to be developed in second grade, and so the second grade teachers really need to know that those are solid, and if there's a student who doesn't have them solid, they'll need to know that as well. Anchor facts should be held to a higher standard of efficiency than all other facts, since they have to come to mind very quickly if you're going to use it as a base fact to develop a strategy. So really the students should know these very quickly within 1 to 2 seconds. The teacher might also want to know to what extent they're able to use them to derive a level 3 method, which strategies are solid already, because they have to continue that work with level 3 strategies. So they really are going to need to know what have the students done, who knows what as far as those strategies. Not merely what's covered by the teacher, but for individual students, who's got which strategy down pat. Which facts remain difficult for a given child, and to what extent are they able to use what they know about addition to get those subtraction facts coming along. All of that is where second grade is going to pick up, and so this is the kind of assessment data that really needs to be passed on to the second grade teachers. So as a summary here, you see that in general, assessment has shifted from giving kids a lot of facts over and over and over, that's general, to more targeted practice, where we're really focusing on small groups to get efficient with those small groups first, very targeted, and those groups are based more on strategic thinking than on just a number of an addend, like the +7 facts. Instead of rote practice, we're going to strategic practice. Instead of practice worksheets and time tests, we're going more towards number talks, really building strategies over time, reinforcement tasks that give them a chance to use strategy. So those reinforcement tasks tend not to be timed, because children oftentimes are not very they're not thinking well. Even adults, to be honest, when we're under a lot of pressure, make a lot of mistakes and we're not thinking as clearly as we should. So the reinforcement tasks, they give them a more low-risk environment to try out the new strategy. And then also, in the past, our approach to fact fluency has been disconnected from number sense, and now we're really using it to both extend from number sense and to reinforce it. Well, I hope you've had a lot of ideas about how to help strategic